Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1. A tree in a quiet room. Evening light rests softly upon a shallow ceramic pot, quiet in color, somewhere between gray and blue. Inside lies a low rise of dark soil. Moss follows the curve of exposed roots, and the small tree rises with an easy bend. Its trunk widens near the soil and narrows toward a crown of carefully spaced branches. Through their openings, the eye finds places to rest. The pot remains still. This is a bonsai. The word may suggest a naturally miniature species, but bonsai are ordinary woody plants cultivated in containers. A pine used for bonsai belongs to the same living world as a pine on a hillside. Maples, junipers, elms, beeches, and flowering shrubs can also be trained this way. Some species have small leaves or compact habits, and growers sometimes choose dwarf cultivars. But size alone does not make a bonsai. Bonsai is the patient cultivation and artistic training of a living plant. The shallow pot limits root space, but does not create the tree's form by itself. Branches are pruned to direct and balance growth. New shoots may be shortened, so light and air can reach the crown. At suitable intervals, the tree is lifted gently. Some roots are trimmed, fresh soil is added, and the plant is settled again. This maintains a compact, healthy root system. No single drastic act makes a bonsai. Its character emerges through repeated care, season after season. Buds open, leaves mature, and roots fill the soil. The tree responds to water, sunlight, temperature, wind, and changing day length. Human intention is present, but so is the nature of the plant. A caretaker must observe, rather than simply command. Some species grow strongly at their tips, others send shoots from older wood. Some tolerate substantial pruning, while others ask for a lighter hand. The work becomes a quiet conversation, carried through growth and response, with pauses lasting months or years. A bonsai may begin as a seed, a rooted cutting, or a young nursery tree. An established garden plant may find a new purpose. In some places, suitable wild trees are collected, though this must be legal, responsible, and careful, respecting both the landscape and the tree's survival. Whatever its beginning, the plant remains alive and unfinished. Over time, bark may become rougher, branches may thicken and lower, and surface roots may broaden, making the tree seem settled through many seasons. Bonsai often suggests age through a tapering trunk, weathered curves, visible roots, careful proportion, and calm irregularity. Open space may evoke branches lost to shade, snow, wind, or time. Yet apparent age is not always literal age. A young plant can be trained to carry qualities associated with an ancient tree, while an old bonsai may remain light and graceful. The image is not merely a record of years, but an interpretation of how trees inhabit time. Time continues through the tree. In spring, buds swell and tender leaves appear. Summer brings fuller growth. In autumn, some species turn gold, copper, or red before releasing their leaves. In winter, a deciduous bonsai reveals every branch and fine twig against the open air. Many temperate bonsai need this seasonal cycle and usually live outdoors, receiving suitable sunlight, fresh air, rain, and natural changes in temperature. They are not permanent ornaments for an indoor table. Tropical and subtropical species have different needs, and in cold climates, may require winter protection indoors. Even then, they still need proper light, warmth, air, and care. The tree in our evening room may be present only briefly, before returning to a sheltered outdoor bench. To see bonsai only as decoration is to miss its nature. It is horticulture, because the plant must remain healthy. Design, because line, balance, proportion, and open space matter. And a practice of attention. The caretaker notices the angle of a shoot, moisture in the soil, the color of a leaf, and the slow thickening of a branch. Each detail quietly indicates the tree's condition and possible direction. The finished image is never entirely finished. A balanced branch may grow too strongly next year. A dense crown may need opening to light. Roots may fill the pot, and unexpected shoots may offer new possibilities. The tree is shaped, but it also answers. As it changes, its caretaker must learn to change with it. This living practice has a long history. The Japanese art now known around the world did not arise alone or all at once. Its deeper roots lead toward older Chinese traditions of cultivating miniature trees and creating landscapes in trays. One important name for these traditions is penjing, associated with scenery presented in a container. Penjing may include trees, stones, plants, and other elements suggesting cliffs, forests, islands, or mountains. A stone becomes a peak. Moss suggests a meadow or shaded valley. A group of trees calls to mind a forest disappearing into mist. A small arrangement can invite the imagination into a wide landscape. Over centuries, ideas and objects connected with miniature landscapes traveled between China and Japan through many kinds of contact. Monks, diplomats, craftspeople, merchants, artists, texts, and treasured objects all took part in this broad exchange. Japanese growers gradually developed their own practices, values, containers, displays, and methods of training. The result was neither a simple copy of an unchanged Chinese art, nor a single invention passing neatly from one place to another. It was a long history of related traditions shaped by different landscapes, philosophies, materials, and generations of skilled hands. They shared ancestry while continuing along distinct paths. From Japan, bonsai eventually traveled farther. It appeared at exhibitions, entered gardens and public collections, inspired clubs, and found caretakers around the world. People learned to work with local species and climates. The art continued to change while carrying traces of its cultural journey. In each place, the rhythm remained familiar: watering, watching, pruning, repotting, waiting, and responding. For now, there is only the tree in the quiet room. Evening has deepened. Its trunk casts a slender shadow across the soil, and moss gathers around one root like grass at a hillside's foot. A branch reaches beyond the pot, and the shallow container seems to open into a wider country. The rough bark suggests a pine above a valley. Spaces between leaves become patches of sky. A small stone near the trunk takes on the presence of a distant outcrop, worn smooth by rain. Beyond it, imagination finds slopes fading into mist. The room grows still, but the tree is not motionless. Water moves within it, roots rest among particles of soil, and leaves hold the fading light. Though no change can be seen from moment to moment, growth continues in its quiet measure. Within this modest arrangement are echoes of mountain paths, temple courtyards, garden walls, nurseries, and homes. There are also countless hands watering, pruning, repotting, carrying, studying, and waiting. Some cared for trees only a few seasons, others continued for decades. A long-lived bonsai may pass from one caretaker to another. Each receives both a living plant and an unfinished task. The tree carries signs of earlier decisions, while its newest leaves belong entirely to the present season. The tree is small, but its history is spacious. To follow that history, we may let attention pass through its branches into the landscape they suggest. Beyond the pot are old mountains, quiet stones, and trees shaped by wind. Mist settles in valleys. Roots find narrow holds among rocks, and branches turn toward light, bearing marks of weather and time. Farther west and deeper in the past, the early tray landscapes of China are waiting in the mist. Chapter 2: Ancient Chinese Roots. In the softened light of an ancient painted chamber, an attendant walks with measured steps. Long robes fall in graceful folds. In both hands, the attendant carries a shallow vessel. Within it are rocks and living plants, arranged as though a small piece of the outdoor world has been lifted from the earth and brought quietly inside. The scene appears in a mural dated to 706 CE. It lies within the tomb associated with Li Shan, a prince of China's Tang dynasty, also known as Prince Zhonghui. Many centuries have passed since the artist placed color upon the wall, yet the painted attendant continues to carry the vessel, and the little composition within it remains visible. This mural is among the earliest well-known pieces of visual evidence for miniature tray compositions in China. It suggests that arrangements of plants and rocks in shallow vessels were already familiar within Tang court culture. Those who saw the image would have understood what the attendant was carrying. They may also have recognized the larger landscape suggested within the vessel's narrow boundaries. The mural does not mark a precise beginning. It is not a picture of the first penjing or the first bonsai, and it does not reveal the name of a single inventor. Traditions made from living plants rarely begin at one exact moment. They grow more like gardens. An observation is shared. A method passes from one pair of hands to another. Certain forms are remembered, cultivated, and gradually refined. Some histories place the roots of miniature cultivated scenery earlier than the Tang dynasty. That may be so, but the surviving evidence is fragmentary. Living arrangements made from leaves, soil, bark, and roots do not usually endure through many centuries. Their containers may be separated from their original contents, while the plants themselves return to the earth. Words also change as generations pass. An old term may not describe precisely the same practice in every period. Meanings shift, methods develop, and several related traditions may exist beside one another. It is therefore best to regard the tomb mural as an early window, rather than a starting line. Through that window, we glimpse a practice already underway. The broad Chinese tradition of creating miniature landscapes is known as penjing. The word can be understood approximately as tray scenery or landscape in a tray. It describes something richer than a small houseplant placed in a container. A penjing composition may contain a single carefully cultivated tree. It may bring trees and rocks together, or it may form a wider miniature landscape from plants, stones, suggestions of water, and other scenic elements. Within such a composition, scale becomes fluid. A pale stone may suggest a distant mountain face. A patch of low greenery may resemble a meadow, a wooded bank, or growth beside a quiet path. Open space may feel like water, sky, or mist. A few slender trunks may suggest a forest, continuing far beyond the edge of the tray. The material remains small enough to hold near the body, as the attendant holds the composition in the mural. Yet the imagined landscape can feel broad and distant. The eye sees a few stones and plants. The mind completes valleys, ridges, paths, and open air. Another related Chinese term is penzai, meaning a plant cultivated in a tray or container. The written characters used for penzai are the same characters that would later be pronounced bonsai in Japanese. The shared characters preserve a quiet connection between the Chinese and Japanese traditions. Still, penjing and bonsai should not be treated as identical. Over long periods, artists and gardeners in China and Japan developed distinct preferences, methods, and forms of presentation. Japanese bonsai would emerge from the broader inheritance of Chinese miniature landscape traditions, then continue along its own cultural path. For now, the story remains in China, beside shallow trays, living plants, and stones that call distant mountains to mind. Before there were cultivated trees and vessels, there were compact trees in the open landscape. Across mountains, cliffs, and high valleys, trees grew wherever roots could find a hold. Some stood in deep soil and rose beneath open skies. Others began life in narrow cracks between rocks, on exposed ridges, or along difficult slopes where little soil remained. In such places, growth followed a slower and more demanding rhythm. Wind pressed against branches year after year. Snow rested upon them during the cold season. Exposed rock limited the space available to roots. Poor soil offered fewer resources, while grazing animals could remove tender shoots. The tree remained alive, but its form was shaped by continual adjustment. Under these conditions, a tree might stay compact even as it became old. Its trunk could lean away from persistent wind. Branches might twist, break, and continue in a new direction. Roots could spread across stone, or enter narrow crevices in search of a secure hold. A tree shaped in this way might be reduced in size, but not in character. It could appear ancient and enduring, carrying the record of its surroundings in every bend. A turn in the trunk might reveal years of pressure from weather. A low branch might show how the tree had reached toward available light. A dense crown might speak quietly of slow growth in difficult ground. Such trees were living responses to their landscapes. They were not incomplete versions of taller trees. Their forms belonged to the places in which they had grown. Rock, wind, snow, grazing, and limited soil had guided them over many seasons. Their compact scale was part of a long relationship with the world around them. Close observation of weathered trees offered important visual models for miniature cultivation. A tree clinging to an exposed slope could show how roots adapt to stone. A trunk leaning across open space could reveal balance under pressure. A twisted branch could suggest the patient effects of wind, snow, and repeated growth. The lesson was not simply that a tree could be kept small. It was that a small tree could still carry the presence of age and landscape. Its form could suggest a life spent on a mountain ridge, beside exposed rock, or beneath seasons of heavy weather. Cultivated tray scenery brought these distant qualities close. A person could stand before a living composition and imagine mountain trees without traveling into remote heights. The plant in the vessel remained a real living organism, responding to water, light, soil, air, and seasonal change. At the same time, its shape could suggest a place much larger than itself. Here, horticulture and imagination met. The grower attended to the needs of roots and branches. The composition also depended upon proportion, texture, placement, and open space. A stone mattered not only as a piece of rock, but as the ridge, cliff, or distant peak it might resemble. A branch mattered not only for its leaves, but for the direction it gave to the scene. Even the unfilled portions of a tray could hold meaning. Open space might become a quiet valley, a river, a lake, or a veil of mist. Nothing needed to be represented in complete detail. A few carefully chosen forms could invite the mind to travel beyond what the eye could see. This was not the reduction of a landscape into a mere ornament. It was a way of allowing the qualities of a landscape to gather within a small space. Stone retained its weight. A living tree continued to grow. Empty space remained open. Together they created the suggestion of a wider world. The attendant in the Tang mural carries the shallow vessel through a courtly setting. Yet the composition points beyond painted walls and enclosed rooms. Its rocks recall exposed slopes. Its plants suggest woodlands, mountain paths, and trees shaped by weather. The arrangement is contained, but the imagination is not. Perhaps this is why the ancient image remains so quietly compelling. It shows something small being carried with care. The vessel is supported from beneath. The rocks and plants rise only a short distance above its rim. Nothing in the scene is hurried. The miniature landscape seems to travel gently through the chamber, held between human hands. Within the tray, cultivated space and the memory of wild places rest together. Earth lies inside a crafted vessel. Roots settle into a bounded area. Stones keep their rough surfaces. Living stems turn toward light. Human attention works beside the natural habits of growth. The scene is small enough to carry, but spacious enough to contemplate. We may return once more to the painted attendant. Around the figure, the colors have endured through long ages. In the shallow vessel, the rocks rise like distant heights. The plants stand among them as trees might stand upon a ridge. The mural gives no exact beginning, and it doesn't need to. It offers something quieter, evidence of a tradition already known, already carried, and already capable of holding a larger landscape within a narrow tray. As we look, the scale begins gently to change. The shallow vessel seems to widen into a valley. Its rocks become mountains touched by cloud. Small stems become enduring trunks, shaped by wind and thin soil. The spaces between them fill with imagined paths, water, and pale air. The attendant remains within the ancient chamber, carrying a composition of rocks and plants. Yet in the mind, those rocks have become distant peaks. The few living stems have become trees on high slopes. From a handful of forms, an entire world begins to appear, and there, among imagined mountains, another question waits quietly. Why could a few stones and trees suggest so much? Why could a landscape held in a tray open into distance, stillness, and contemplation? The answer rests beyond the chamber, where the miniature mountains rise into mist. Chapter 3: Mountains Brought Near. The country that appears within the vessel has no fixed border. Its mountains rise from dark stone, its forests from a few small trees, and its rivers from narrow spaces where water catches the light. An imagined path passes among these forms, curving behind a rock before returning gently to view. We may follow that path slowly. At first it leads beside a shallow pool. The water is still enough to reflect a branch leaning over it. Beyond the branch stands a rough stone, dark at its base and pale along one weathered edge. It is small enough to lift with two hands. Yet within the miniature landscape, it suggests an entire mountain range. A narrow line upon its surface resembles a distant ravine. A hollow might become a cave, while a pointed crest rises like a summit touched by cloud. In the quiet water below, the reflection deepens the scene, as though another mountain descends beneath the surface. Nothing here is an exact copy of a particular place. The stone does not need to reproduce every slope of a real mountain. It only needs to awaken the sense of mountains, their age, their stillness, their patient presence beneath changing skies. This way of suggesting a larger world within a smaller one appeared throughout Chinese gardens and landscape arts. A garden enclosed by walls could represent broad regions of nature. Rocks could stand for mountain ranges. Pools could suggest rivers, lakes, or seas. A grove of carefully placed trees might evoke a forest extending far beyond sight. Scale became flexible. A visitor could stand beside a garden rock while imagining it as a distant peak. A viewer could look into a ceramic tray and feel for a moment that there was room to wander inside it. These miniature landscapes belonged to a wide and richly connected artistic world. They shared ideas with landscape painting, poetry, ceramics, garden design, carved mountain forms, and the appreciation of unusual natural stones. Each art offered another way to bring distant country close and to make room for reflection within daily life. Scholars sometimes kept especially expressive rocks in their studies or gardens. These stones, often called scholars' rocks, were valued for qualities such as texture, shape, balance, hollows, and graceful irregularity. One rock might resemble a cliff worn by rain, another might seem like a mountain pierced by caves, a third might appear to twist upward through mist. The rock was not merely raw material waiting to be improved, its natural character invited attention. The viewer observed what water, pressure, mineral growth, and time had already made. Human choice then gave the stone a setting in which those qualities could be seen more clearly. Penjing could work in a similar way. A tree's bends, scars, roots, and changes of direction became part of the composition. So did the form of a stone, the surface of the soil, and the open space around them. The artist cultivated and arranged these living and natural elements, but did not erase their histories. Our imagined path now passes beneath the small tree. Its trunk turns slightly before rising, as though it once grew along an exposed slope. The bark has gathered into ridges. A branch reaches over the path, and a few leaves rest in the pale air. Although the tree may not be ancient, its form can call to mind the endurance of old forests. In Chinese culture, mountains carried many overlapping meanings. They were real places of stone, vegetation, weather, labor, and travel. They were also associated with remoteness and retreat. A mountain could suggest distance from the demands of public life, offering a quiet place for study, reflection, or spiritual practice. Mountains could symbolize longevity because they appeared to endure while generations passed around them. Their peaks and valleys could express a sense of cosmic order, a world of high and low, mist and rock, movement and stillness. In stories and works of art, remote ranges could also become the imagined homes of immortals, beings who had passed beyond the ordinary limits of age. For a scholar living in a busy town, a painted or miniature mountain could offer a form of inward travel. One did not need to cross every river or climb every ridge in the body. The mind could follow a path into seclusion. It could pause beneath a cliff, listen to an imagined stream, and continue toward peaks hidden by cloud. Taoist ideas were one influence on this landscape imagery. Taoism includes varied teachings and traditions, but many Taoist themes attend closely to the rhythms of nature, to transformation, and to ways of living without unnecessary struggle against the character of things. Water wears stone slowly, branches turn toward light, leaves emerge, deepen in color, and fall. Seasons transform the same valley again and again. Nothing remains entirely fixed, yet familiar patterns continue. Images of reclusion and immortal mountain realms also became part of this artistic language. A tiny path disappearing behind a rock might suggest a journey away from crowded roads. A cave-shaped hollow might seem to open toward another realm. Water around a stone could turn that stone into a distant island, separated from ordinary shores. Yet Taoism alone does not explain Penjing. No single philosophy or religious tradition can contain the full history of miniature landscapes in China. Buddhist traditions also shaped understandings of nature, contemplation, and change. Confucian traditions influenced scholarly culture, ethical reflection, and ideas about a cultivated life. Poetry and painting offered ways of seeing and remembering. Regional horticultural knowledge provided the practical skill needed to keep trees healthy through heat, cold, rain, and dry weather. Local materials mattered as well. Artists worked with the tree species available to them, the forms of nearby mountains, the stones found in a particular region, and the vessels created by ceramic makers. The appearance of the composition could grow from its landscape, climate, and community. Individual artists brought their own memories and intentions. One might create a quiet scene with a single tree and a dark rock. Another might build a detailed landscape of cliffs, water, bridges, and small figures. Some compositions could suggest familiar countryside. Others could be deliberately fantastical, with towering peaks and improbable forms belonging more to imagination than to geography. For this reason, Penjing has never possessed only one appearance. Across China, many regional schools and approaches developed. Some favored restraint and open space. Others welcomed dramatic movement, rich detail, bright color, narrative, or bold contrast. A composition might be spare enough to hold only a tree, a stone, and a breathing space of soil. Another might seem to contain an entire journey, with a path winding from a low valley to a high and distant ridge. Neither approach defines all Penjing. Each offers one way of seeing a broad and varied tradition. It would therefore be inaccurate to describe every Penjing composition as having one religious purpose or one fixed visual style. It would also be misleading to say that Chinese Penjing is always wild, while Japanese bonsai is always strict. Both traditions contain great variety. Both have changed across regions and generations. Their differences are real, but simple oppositions cannot describe them well. The imagined path helps us understand why. We cross a tiny stream, perhaps no more than a narrow ribbon of water between two stones. Ahead, the composition seems to open. A low rock becomes a nearby hill, while a taller one rises beyond it. The difference in their size and placement creates a feeling of distance. A small tree beside the taller rock appears far away, even though it is only a hand's breadth from the first. This is imaginative travel. The viewer does not simply look at separate objects. The eye moves among them, and the mind gives those movements space. It enters valleys, follows paths beneath cliffs, pauses beside water, and passes under branches. It may cross a bridge that is only suggested, or look toward a peak partly concealed behind a tree. Open areas are not truly empty. They may hold mist, sky, distance, or quiet air. A bare space between two rocks can become a deep valley. A clear surface of water can widen into a lake. A pale stretch of soil may become a road continuing beyond sight. A ceramic tray sets a boundary around the scene, but that boundary does not end the journey. Instead, it concentrates attention. Because the world has been reduced to a few forms, each form can be noticed. The grain of bark, the edge of stone, the reflection on water, the interval between one tree and another. The viewer may return to the same composition many times and discover a different path through it. Morning light may reveal the rough face of a rock. Evening shadow may deepen its hollows. New leaves may soften the branches in spring, while a more open form may appear after leaves have fallen. The landscape remains contained, yet it is never entirely still. In such a scene, large and small are not opposites. They meet. A tiny tree can carry the memory of an ancient forest. A dark stone can become a mountain. Water gathered around a rock can widen into a sea. Our path now descends toward that water. Behind us, the miniature valley rests within its tray, shaped by natural growth, human care, regional knowledge, and generations of artistic thought. The little tree stands quietly near the stone. The surface of the pool reflects a narrow space of sky. Before us lies a shore. The water extends beyond the composition, joining wider rivers and distant seas. Along those routes traveled monks, merchants, diplomats, artists, craftspeople, books, ceramics, and living knowledge. No single voyage carried the whole tradition, and no single moment marked its passage. Ideas moved gradually with people and objects, changing as they entered new places, and across the water, the art of landscapes in small containers would begin another long chapter. Carried by many hands and understood in new ways, it would slowly take root in Japan. Chapter 4. The journey to Japan. Beyond the sheltered shore, the sea lies beneath a muted sky. Low clouds soften the horizon, until the boundary between water and air seems almost to disappear. A wooden ship moves steadily through the gentle swells. Its sail gathers the wind, and light rain leaves a silver sheen upon the deck. Inside the ship are objects chosen for a long crossing. Ceramic vessels are wrapped in cloth and straw. Scrolls rest within protective cases. There are religious texts, artworks, tools, and perhaps small packets of seeds. The travelers also carry knowledge that cannot be wrapped or placed inside a chest. They bring ways of writing, building, painting, shaping clay, arranging stones, tending gardens, and caring for living plants. No single voyage brought all these things to Japan. Cultural exchange was slower and more continuous, like water moving with the tides. Ships crossed and returned over many centuries. Wider networks connected communities in China, Korea, and Japan. Along these routes, ideas passed from one person to another, and from one generation to the next. Among the travelers were monks, diplomats, official envoys, merchants, craftspeople, immigrants, artists, and others making their way across the region. Craftspeople carried practical skills. Immigrants brought customs remembered from earlier homes. Artists exchanged images and methods. Travelers described the places they had visited and the objects they had seen. Each person carried only a small part of a much larger movement. Together, however, they formed lasting connections across East Asia. From the 7th through the 9th centuries, Japanese missions to Tang China were especially important. Envoys crossed the sea to study and returned with texts, objects, observations, and knowledge. The journeys required careful preparation, and the passage could be long. Yet the exchange did not end when the travelers reached the shore. What they brought home could be studied, practiced, copied, questioned, and gradually transformed. A scroll might inspire another artist. A ceramic vessel might be examined by a potter. Garden ideas could influence the placement of stones, plants, and water near a residence or temple. Writing systems, religious teachings, artworks, and horticultural practices all became part of a continuing exchange. Among the many traditions moving through these networks were ways of appreciating nature in concentrated form. Chinese practices involving potted trees, tray landscapes, rocks, and miniature mountain scenes probably reached Japan through these continuing connections. Yet the surviving evidence does not reveal one first tree, one particular shipment, one exact year, or one person who can be named as the sole bearer of the tradition. It is pleasant to imagine a small tree aboard a ship, protected from rain and salt spray beneath a simple covering. Such a journey may have taken place more than once, but living plants are fragile travelers, and knowledge can move even when a tree itself does not. A painting of a miniature landscape could suggest a new arrangement. A ceramic tray could show how soil, roots, stones, and water might be held within a small boundary. A traveler could describe something seen in a distant garden. A gardener or craftsperson to demonstrate a method with patient hands. In this way, miniature tree and miniature landscape culture may have been transmitted to Japan and renewed there at several different times. Some forms may have arrived early, while others appeared later. A practice could become familiar in one place, grow quiet for a time, and then return through another traveler, artwork, vessel, or teacher. The history is not a single line. It is more like a network of waterways, joining, separating, and meeting again. Buddhism was an important part of these cultural currents. Buddhist texts, images, ritual objects, and artistic ideas traveled across regions. Monks journeyed to study, then returned with books, objects, and memories of distant places. Temple networks provided settings where knowledge could be preserved, copied, discussed, practiced, and adapted. Yet it is too simple to say that Zen monks alone brought bonsai to Japan. Temples and monks certainly helped carry art and material culture. Still, the history involved many schools of Buddhism, as well as many people beyond religious life. Diplomats, official envoys, merchants, immigrants, craftspeople, artists, gardeners, and anonymous caretakers all contributed to the movement of ideas. The miniature landscape did not pass from one culture to another as something sealed against change. It was received and interpreted. It entered different climates, buildings, customs, and patterns of daily life. Chinese penjing continued along its own varied paths. In Japan, related practices gradually developed in response to local surroundings and evolving preferences. Shared ancestry remained, but adaptation began as soon as an idea entered a new place. Local climates shaped the work. Japanese practitioners learned from tree species suited to nearby soils and seasons. Rain, summer warmth, winter cold, wind, and regional variation all influenced cultivation. A tree that flourished in one place might need different care in another. Knowledge had to grow from close observation. Architecture also affected how a small tree or landscape might be viewed. A planting placed beside a veranda could be seen against wood, plaster, or the open air of a garden. The shape of a container, the position of the tree, and the space surrounding it changed the feeling of the display. Over time, local customs guided how these living compositions were presented near temples and residences. Even the words used for them were not yet fixed. Terms varied, and their meanings sometimes overlapped. A form called bonsai might suggest a tray mountain or miniature landscape. Bonseki came to describe arrangements of stones and sand upon a tray, often evoking islands, cliffs, or distant ranges. There were also potted trees, ornamental plantings, tray landscapes, and other related forms that do not fit neatly into modern categories. These traditions were connected, but they were not identical to what is now called bonsai. Their boundaries remained fluid. One tray might contain a tree and stones together, another might focus upon rock and sand. A potted tree could be valued for qualities different from those emphasized in a miniature landscape. The word bon refers to a tray or shallow container. Yet the Japanese art later called bonsai did not arise merely by placing a tree in a pot. Observation and presentation. Practitioners learned how local trees responded to pruning, transplanting, wind, shade, heat, and cold. They considered how the line of a trunk might suggest age, how open space might give a composition room to breathe, and how a container might support the tree without drawing attention away from it. These choices were not simple copies of Chinese practice, nor did they erase their Chinese ancestry. They formed a conversation across time and water. Cultural forms, techniques, symbols, and possibilities arrived through exchange. Japanese practitioners then allowed them to grow under new conditions. Continuity and change rested together, like roots held within the same earth. The sea crossing remains a gentle image for this process. A ship rarely travels upon perfectly still water. It responds to wind and current. Its course may bend as it moves toward the distant shore. Artistic traditions travel in much the same way. What arrives is remembered, but it is also interpreted. A practice enters new rooms and gardens. It meets new materials, local species, and changing tastes. What is planted draws nourishment from its new soil. Perhaps, after one such crossing, a wrapped vessel is carried carefully from a ship. Rainwater darkens the road leading away from the harbor. The vessel passes through several hands before reaching a quiet residence or temple. We cannot know whether it holds a living tree, an arrangement of stones, or another object associated with miniature landscapes. Perhaps what matters most is not the vessel itself, but the knowledge traveling with it. The idea has crossed the water, ready to be considered in a new setting. In time, a small tray or potted tree is placed beside a wooden veranda. Its leaves stir in the damp air. Behind it are the quiet rooms of a temple or an elegant residence. Beyond it lies a garden washed by rain. Nothing announces the beginning of a new art. There's no single moment that separates what came before from what will follow. There's only a tree, a container, and the patient attention of those who pause to look. Here within medieval Japan, the long journey begins to settle. Miniature trees and landscapes will appear near temples and elite residences, shaped by local hands, local conditions, and changing customs of display. The sea is now behind them, though its slow currents remain within their history. Chapter 5. Trees beside temples and residences. Beside a wooden veranda, a small pine rises from a low vessel. Its trunk is dark against the pale surface of a paper screen. A few branches extend into the open air, and their needles hold the quiet green of every season. Beyond the veranda, a garden rests beneath a light covering of mist. Somewhere within the grounds, a temple bell sounds. Its low note passes through the trees, over tiled roofs, and into still rooms. A scene like this belongs easily to the imagination. Yet miniature landscapes truly were present in medieval Japan. They appeared near temples, aristocratic homes, and the residences of warriors. They could be viewed among painted screens, polished wood, garden stones, incense, and carefully chosen seasonal flowers. These cultivated objects were not always what people today would call bonsai. Some were small trees growing in containers. Others were fuller landscapes combining plants, rocks, sculpted mountains, and vessels of many shapes. A display might suggest a distant peak, a wooded island, or a valley held within the small space of a tray. Their variety reflected the traditions from which they had grown. Ideas and objects arriving from China had entered a country with its own gardens, religious practices, local materials, and ways of arranging space. Over time, Japanese caretakers and artists interpreted miniature landscapes according to their own surroundings and preferences. There was no single day when one tradition ended and another began. The change was gradual, like a branch thickening through many seasons. Each generation received something from the one before it, then adjusted the practice through observation, care, and use. One important glimpse of this early history survives in the illustrated legends of Kasuga Shrine. Produced in the early 14th century, these painted scrolls tell stories connected with the shrine. As a scroll is unrolled, architecture, figures, clothing, animals, and landscapes pass before the viewer in a long, measured sequence. Within one painted scene near an elite residence, there appears a low container holding a small landscape. It occupies only a small part of the larger image, yet its presence is meaningful. The artist could include it because such an object was recognizable within the world being shown. It indicates that cultivated miniature landscapes were known in medieval Japan and had found a place within refined surroundings. The image does not offer a complete history. It cannot tell us who tended the planting, where it came from, or precisely how those who saw it understood it. It does not reveal how often it was watered, where it was kept in winter, or how long it remained in that residence. But the painting offers something quieter and more intimate. It shows a miniature landscape at home in daily life. The small container stands near a residence, as naturally as a screen, a vessel, or a garden path. It does not need to occupy the center of the scene. Its familiar presence is evidence enough. Religious institutions were closely associated with such objects during the medieval period. Temple grounds held trees of great age, as well as gardens shaped for contemplation. Monks and visitors encountered landscapes not only as scenery, but also as places where change, endurance, emptiness, and renewal could be observed. A small pine, or a stone suggesting a mountain, could gather some of these impressions into a modest space. Aristocratic households also valued carefully arranged objects. Placement mattered. A vessel, painting, branch, or small tree could be selected to suit the season and the character of a room. The open space surrounding an object could be as important as the object itself. Warrior elites, who became patrons of cultural practices, adopted and adapted these forms of display as well. Thus, miniature trees and landscapes passed among several worlds. They stood near temple verandas, within elegant residences, and in the homes of military households. Each setting brought its own habits of attention. Folding screens and later paintings offer further glimpses of potted trees and miniature landscapes. In these works, the plants are rarely the most prominent feature. They may wait at the edge of a room or courtyard, quiet but carefully placed. Yet that quietness is part of their meaning. It suggests that the practice had become woven into visual culture. Literature and theater preserved another kind of memory. A medieval no play called Hachi no Ki carries potted trees in its title. The words mean the potted trees. The play tells of an impoverished warrior who receives a traveler during cold weather. Though the warrior has little fuel, he offers the stranger shelter. To warm his guest, he burns 3 potted trees that he has prized: a plum, a pine, and a cherry. The traveler is later revealed to be a powerful figure, and the warrior is rewarded for his loyalty. The story can be considered gently, without lingering over the loss of the trees. Its central concern is hospitality, sacrifice, and honor. The plum, pine, and cherry matter because they are treasured possessions. By surrendering them, the warrior shows the depth of his welcome and the steadiness of his character. The trees also carry seasonal associations. Plum blossoms appear while winter still lingers, bringing fragrance into cold air. Pine remains green through the year and suggests endurance. Cherry flowers belong to the brief beauty of spring. Together, the 3 potted trees form a small calendar of the changing seasons. Their role in the play suggests that audiences understood cultivated potted trees as objects worthy of care and affection. The sacrifice has meaning because the trees have value. They are not common pieces of fuel, but living possessions tended over time. Still, Hachi no Ki must be approached as a theatrical and moral tale, not as the factual record of one identifiable bonsai owner. Its authorship and exact date of composition are not entirely certain, nor can the play serve as a simple guide to the way every medieval tree was cultivated or displayed. What it can reveal is cultural meaning. Through this story, potted trees became associated with hospitality, sacrifice, loyalty, and honor. The trees stand within the play as signs of patient care, seasonal beauty, and something precious willingly offered. Beyond the stage, miniature displays continued to take many forms. A container might hold one tree, or it might hold several plants. Rocks could represent cliffs or islands. Sculpted forms might suggest distant mountains. Other elements could help evoke a more complete landscape. Some arrangements invited the eye to wander through an imagined valley or along the shore of a tiny island. For this reason, medieval Japanese miniature landscapes should not all be described as modern bonsai. The modern image of bonsai often centers on a single tree whose roots, trunk, branches, and container form a balanced composition. In medieval Japan, the boundaries were less settled. Tree cultivation existed beside broader traditions of making landscapes in miniature, and the two often overlapped. Complete landscapes did not suddenly disappear, nor did the single tree immediately become the only focus. Instead, preferences shifted gradually. Different forms continued beside one another, shaped by the places where they were kept and by the people who cared for them. Even so, attention to the character of the individual tree was deepening. A caretaker might notice the silhouette of a pine against a pale wall. The silhouette is the tree's overall outline, the shape seen before individual needles or twigs come into view. Another observer might admire the character of a trunk, whether it rose straight, leaned gently, or carried visible signs of age. Proportion also mattered. The thickness of the trunk, the reach of the branches, and the size of the container could create a feeling of harmony. A tree might seem strong or delicate, youthful or ancient, depending on how these elements related to one another. Seasonal expression gave every tree another quality. Bare winter branches revealed structures that summer leaves concealed. Plum buds swelled and opened into lightly scented flowers. Other foliage changed as the year moved onward. Pine held its darker green, while nearby plants altered around it. A cultivated tree was never a fixed object. It changed with the seasons, responding to light, warmth, water, and time. Its appearance in one month could differ gently from its appearance in another. Those who cared for it learned to see not one finished form, but a living sequence. The relationship between tree and container also received growing attention. A vessel supported the planting physically, while completing it visually. Its depth, color, texture, and shape affected the way the tree was seen. A heavy container might make a delicate tree seem smaller. A restrained vessel could allow an aged trunk to command the eye. Even the open space around the trunk could become part of the composition. These preferences did not arrive all at once, and they did not fully replace complete miniature landscapes. Instead, they gathered slowly through generations of observation. Hands watered roots, removed unwanted growth, turned vessels toward the light, and carried favored trees beneath shelter when the weather required it. Eyes learned to value a branch not only for its leaves, but also for the empty space beneath it. A curve in a trunk could suggest long endurance. A carefully placed tree could bring a quiet sense of landscape into a room without attempting to reproduce every detail of the natural world. Time itself became one of the materials of the art. A stone could suggest an ancient mountain at once, but a trunk gained character slowly. Bark roughened, roots widened, branches responded to repeated care. The cultivated tree became a meeting place between natural growth and human guidance, with neither entirely erasing the other. For now, the trees remained beside quiet verandas and within sheltered courtyards. Temple bells marked the hours. Plum fragrance passed through the cool air, and winter branches drew fine lines against paper screens. A low vessel waited near an open room, holding a tree, a stone, or a small imagined landscape. Yet beyond these still places, Japanese society was changing. In the centuries ahead, city streets would grow busier. Nurseries, markets, and neighborhood gardens would bring cultivated plants before a wider public. Horticultural knowledge once exchanged especially among temples and elite residences, would travel through urban courtyards and the hands of professional growers. From the stillness of the medieval veranda, the history of miniature trees was beginning to move outward. The bell faded. The branches remained, and beyond the temple gate, the livelier horticultural world of the Edo period waited to unfold. Chapter 6: The Edo Period and a Growing Tradition. Beyond the quiet temple veranda, the streets gradually widened. Towns gathered around castles, roads carried travelers between provinces, and merchants arranged their goods beneath wooden eaves. In a nursery lane after rain, shallow pots stood in orderly rows. Their earthen surfaces were dark with moisture. Drops rested on pine needles, while the new leaves of maples appeared almost translucent in the mild morning light. This was the horticultural world of the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868. Across these 2.5 centuries, Japan experienced long intervals of political stability. That stability did not mean life was always easy or peaceful. There were famines, fires, earthquakes, floods, political tensions, and many other hardships. Yet compared with the warfare of earlier generations, the period allowed cities, commerce, crafts, and publishing to grow on a remarkable scale. Edo, the city now called Tokyo, became one of the largest cities in the world. Osaka developed as a center of trade, while Kyoto remained a city of court culture, skilled crafts, temples, and gardens. Smaller castle towns flourished as well. In these growing communities, people encountered plants not only in temple grounds and elite residences, but also in markets, neighborhood gardens, shop fronts, and small courtyards. Interest in horticulture spread through many layers of urban society. Wealthy patrons could afford rare cultivars, old trees, handsome containers, and elaborate displays. Their resources supported specialist growers and encouraged the search for unusual forms. Yet the pleasure of tending plants was not limited entirely to the rich. Townspeople with modest space might keep a few pots near an entrance, beside a narrow veranda, or in a courtyard where sunlight rested for part of the day. Access was never equal. A celebrated specimen could cost far more than an ordinary household could pay, and the finest gardens depended upon land, labor, and time. Even so, enthusiasm for plants became broad enough to shape urban fashions. A person did not need a large estate to observe the unfurling of a leaf, the roughening of bark, or the first opening of a seasonal flower. In the nursery lane, growers tended far more than pines. Flowering cherries and plums stood beside foliage plants admired for the shape or color of their leaves. Dwarf cultivars were valued for their compact growth. Maples offered delicate spring greens and autumn reds. Collectors also sought unusual stems, twisted branches, variegated leaves, and other distinctive features. These interests belonged to a wider culture of close observation. One person might admire a flower that opened for only a few days each year. Another might value a tree for the texture of its bark through every season. Some plants were treasured because they suggested familiar landscapes. Others were sought because they appeared strange, rare, or refined. The world of potted cultivation was varied, and no single taste governed it. Knowledge traveled with the plants. Nurseries became places where experience could be exchanged. Specialist growers learned which soil suited a particular species, when roots might be trimmed, and how a tree should be sheltered through difficult weather. Plant markets brought buyers and growers together. Local fashions carried favored varieties from one neighborhood to another, while collectors shared observations with friends. Commercial publishing widened this circulation. Illustrated books described plants, garden designs, seasonal care, and desirable forms. A printed image could travel much farther than a single tree. A reader might study the arrangement of branches or identify a variety by the shape of its leaves. Books could not replace the gardener's practiced hand, but they allowed horticultural ideas to pass among people who might never meet. In the gardens of feudal households, skilled gardeners maintained valuable collections. Their work required steady attention rather than occasional inspiration. They watched the weather, managed water, renewed soil, controlled unwanted growth, and learned how each species responded over many years. Techniques were preserved through daily practice, then passed from experienced gardeners to younger hands. As society changed, some gardeners who had served great households, or their successors, carried this knowledge into specialist professions. Over time, professional growers devoted increasing attention to miniature trees. They provided plant material, advice, maintenance, and training. Their nurseries became quiet storehouses of living knowledge, held not only in words, but in trunks and roots, simple tools, and seasonal tasks repeated year after year. A gardener's shears made a soft sound among the branches. One shoot was shortened, while another was allowed to remain. The intention was not to complete the tree in a single afternoon. Each cut considered future growth. A branch that looked slight in spring might thicken over several years. A young maple could not be hurried into the appearance of age. The work depended upon returning to the same tree again and again. The potted trees of the Edo period did not necessarily look exactly like the bonsai seen in modern exhibitions. Containers, favored shapes, training methods, and forms of presentation continued to change. Some trees may have appeared less strictly refined by present-day standards. Others belonged to display traditions in which trees appeared beside stones, flowers, ornaments, or elements of garden scenery. Plants might be shown on a veranda, where natural light revealed the colors of bark and leaves. They might be arranged in a garden or brought forward for a seasonal gathering. A flowering plant could be appreciated when its blossoms opened, then returned to its growing place afterward. The life of a cultivated tree involved gentle movement between care and presentation, shelter and sunlight. Tea culture also offered settings in which plants and natural objects could be appreciated. One influential tradition was sencha, a style centered on tea made by steeping leaves. Compared with the highly formalized practice of powdered tea, sencha was associated with a somewhat less formal atmosphere and with the tastes of Chinese scholars and artists, often described as literati. Sencha gatherings encouraged the appreciation of painting, calligraphy, ceramics, flowers, stones, and cultivated plants. During the late Edo period and continuing into the early Meiji era, sencha taste helped encourage newer forms of interior display. A carefully chosen plant might be placed near a scroll, a small object, or a piece of pottery. The arrangement invited quiet attention to the season, to balance, and to the open space surrounding each object. Later generations often pictured bonsai displayed in a tokonoma, a formal alcove in a Japanese room where selected objects may be presented. Such an alcove can provide a serene setting for a tree. Yet this familiar modern image should not be carried backward unchanged through all earlier history. Edo period plants appeared in several kinds of spaces, and display customs varied according to time, place, occasion, and social setting. The tradition was still unfolding. Elite patronage remained important, but city life created more paths along which plants and knowledge could travel. A rare old pine might stand in a wealthy collection, while nearby a shopkeeper tended a younger tree beside a doorway. The two trees were not equal in price or prestige. Still, both belonged to a growing interest in cultivated nature. That interest was broad and lively. Flowering plants, foliage plants, dwarf cultivars, and unusual forms were collected alongside pines and other trees. Some people were drawn to blossoms, others to leaves, and still others to a trunk bent into a shape that seemed to hold the memory of wind. The cultivation of miniature trees grew within this larger horticultural world rather than apart from it. Seasons passed through the nursery rows. Spring brought tender maple leaves. Summer deepened the green of pines. Autumn colored deciduous trees, and winter revealed the fine structure of bare branches. Buyers came and went. Illustrated pages turned beneath careful fingers. Gardeners carried watering vessels along narrow paths, and another generation learned where to place the shears. By the closing decades of the Edo period, miniature tree cultivation had become part of a varied urban and elite horticultural culture. It had not suddenly appeared in its final modern form. Instead, it widened gradually through the work of households, temples, collectors, publishers, merchants, nurseries, and professional growers. Old practices continued, even as new fashions arose beside them. The nursery lane grew quiet toward evening. Water gathered along the rims of rain-darkened pots. A gardener set down the shears, and the last light rested upon fresh maple leaves. After passing through market rows, city courtyards, and generations of careful hands, one might pause beside a low stand. There, in a single shallow pot, a small tree rises from the soil. Its roots hold firmly beneath the surface. Its branches gather the fading light. The plant is living, the container is simple, and together they suggest a name that would eventually become familiar around the world. Chapter 7. The Meaning of Bonsai. In the quiet courtyard, the little tree rests in its shallow pot. Its trunk rises with a gentle turn, and its branches spread into the open air. Between the roots, a few patches of moss soften the surface of the soil. The container is low and broad, offering the tree only a modest depth of earth. This simple arrangement brings us close to the meaning of its name. Bonsai is pronounced roughly bonsai. The word is written in Japanese with 2 characters. We might imagine a brush moving slowly across a sheet of pale paper, laying down one dark shape and then another. The first character, bon, means a tray, basin, or shallow container. The second, sai, refers to planting or cultivation. Together, the 2 characters may be translated simply as tray planting, or a little more fully, a planting cultivated in a tray. The name is plain and practical. It does not claim that the tree belongs to a rare miniature species, nor does it suggest a trick that keeps a plant forever small. Instead, it describes a living arrangement. A plant is cultivated in a container, cared for over time, and gradually guided into a form that evokes the character of a tree growing in a wider landscape. In everyday English, people often say, bonsai tree. This is common and easily understood, yet the word bonsai already refers to the cultivated work, rather than to a separate botanical kind of tree. Many kinds of woody plants can be cultivated as bonsai. Their size and form come from careful horticulture, not from belonging to one naturally miniature species. Horticulture is simply the skilled growing and tending of plants. A bonsai remains small because its growth is thoughtfully managed, because it lives in a limited amount of soil, and because its changing needs are watched through the seasons. Given other conditions, many of the same plants could grow into much larger garden or forest trees, nor is every small plant in a pot automatically a developed bonsai. A young plant placed in a shallow container may be the beginning of one, but bonsai involves long-term horticultural care and artistic training. The grower considers the trunk and the visible roots, the arrangement of branches, the spaces between leaves, and the relationship between the tree and its container. These qualities emerge gradually. Years of cultivation may rest quietly behind what first appears to be a very simple tree. The Japanese word also carries an echo of older Chinese traditions from which miniature tree cultivation partly developed. The same 2 written characters used for bonsai are pronounced penzai in Mandarin Chinese. The sounds are different, but the basic meaning remains similar, a planting cultivated in a tray. Beside penzai is another important Chinese term, penjing. Its first character again refers to a tray or basin, or landscape. Penjing may therefore be understood as scenery in a tray, or as a landscape contained within a shallow vessel. This distinction is useful. Modern Japanese bonsai often centers attention on one tree or on a group of trees. Chinese penjing may more readily gather several elements into a broader scene. Trees and rocks may appear together, sometimes accompanied by small figures, suggestions of water, distant slopes or paths moving through an imagined landscape. A stone may stand for a mountain. An open surface may suggest water or a riverbank. A small figure may offer a quiet sense of human presence within the larger natural world. In this way, bonsai often centers the tree, while penjing may encompass a fuller landscape. Yet this boundary is not a wall. It is better imagined as the soft edge where 2 garden paths meet. Chinese tree penjing may focus on a single tree, with no figure, stream, or miniature building nearby. The trunk and branches may carry the entire expression. Japanese bonsai, meanwhile, can include group plantings that resemble a grove or forest. Some arrangements may suggest cliffs, islands, shorelines, or distant mountains. These are helpful distinctions, but they are not absolute rules. Both traditions contain many approaches. Neither can be reduced to one fixed design or a single way of seeing. It would also be misleading to describe Japanese bonsai as merely a simplified form of Chinese penjing. The practices share ancestry, and ideas traveled between China and Japan over many centuries. Yet within Japan, miniature tree cultivation developed through its own history of temples, residences, gardens, nurseries, exhibitions, and artistic taste. Growers develop distinct approaches to proportion, open space, containers, seasonal presentation, and the character of individual trees. At the same time, penjing continued to develop in China through a rich variety of regional practices. Different places favored different trees, stones, forms, and methods. A landscape created in one region might feel unlike a landscape created in another, just as trees growing on a misty mountain may differ from those rooted on a drier slope. Neither tradition has ever stood still. Chinese and Japanese growers have observed one another's work, directly or indirectly, and the two practices have continued to influence one another. In more recent times, travel, books, photographs, teachers, and exhibitions have allowed ideas to move still farther. The names remain important because they lead us toward distinct cultural histories, yet the living arts themselves have always been open to exchange. The word bonsai became especially familiar beyond East Asia through Japan's modern exhibitions, exports, publications, and teachers. Visitors encountered small trees presented with great care. Trees were carried and shipped abroad. Images appeared in books and other printed works. Japanese practitioners taught methods of pruning branches, guiding trunks, and maintaining roots within shallow containers. As international interest grew, bonsai became the word many people used for almost any artistically trained miniature tree. That broad familiarity does not erase penjing or the deep Chinese history behind tree landscapes. Rather, it reminds us that words travel along paths opened by trade, exhibitions, translation, publication, and teaching. One name may become widely known, while other names carrying related histories wait to be learned more slowly. For a moment, we may let the terminology rest and look again at the tree in the courtyard. Its name tells us about the tray and the planting, but the name cannot contain everything before us. It does not fully describe the rough surface of the bark or the pale green of new growth. It cannot show the way the roots widen near the base of the trunk, giving the small tree a feeling of steadiness. Nor can it hold all the seasons through which the tree has passed, or all the quiet decisions made by the people who tended it. A word may offer a doorway. Beyond that doorway lies the living practice. The container matters, but so does the soil within it. The silhouette matters, but so do the roots hidden below the surface. The tree may suggest age, balance, endurance, or the memory of wind. Yet it must also continue the ordinary work of life. Its leaves receive light, its roots take in water and air. New shoots lengthen, older bark settles into deeper texture. This is why bonsai cannot be understood only as an object of decoration. It is a relationship maintained across time. The grower responds to the tree, and the tree responds in its own slower language. A branch may strengthen. A bud may appear in an unexpected place. Warm weather may dry the soil more quickly. A cooler season may bring a quieter period of growth. The art depends on attention to such changes. Its beauty comes not from stopping growth, but from working gently with growth. The tree is never truly finished. Even an old bonsai continues to extend roots, open leaves, and alter its shape. Its caretaker must notice, consider, and act with patience and restraint. And so the two brush-written characters remain a fitting beginning: tray and cultivation. One gives the tree a place, the other suggests the long work of tending life. The brush lifts from the paper. The dark characters remain, simple and still. Nearby, the living tree continues beyond the written name. A leaf stirs above the shallow pot. Fine roots rest in the soil. The fading light gathers along the edge of the tray. Once the name has been understood, attention returns naturally to the living work itself. The tree's form is never held by language alone. It is sustained by water, roots, light, time, and careful hands. Chapter 8. Patience, Pruning, and Form. Careful hands begin, not with shaping, but with noticing. In the morning, a grower may pause beside the tree and look at the surface of the soil. Its color may have changed since the previous day. A fingertip may sense moisture just beneath the upper grains. The leaves may appear firm and fresh, or they may suggest that the tree has passed through a warm, drying afternoon. Nearby, a breeze moves softly through the garden. Clouds gather beyond the roofline, and the day ahead may be cooler than the one before. Watering a bonsai is not a task performed by the clock alone. it is a skilled daily judgment. The grower considers the kind of tree, the condition of the soil, the size and depth of the container, the weather, the season, and the health of the plant. A vigorous tree covered in summer foliage may use water quickly. Another tree resting in cool weather may need much less. A small pot can dry sooner than a larger one. Wind may draw moisture from the soil, even when the air does not feel especially hot. A tree in full light may have different needs from one standing in a more sheltered place. Because bonsai containers are often shallow, their soil can dry quickly, yet constant wetness can be harmful as well. Roots need moisture, but they also need oxygen. If water remains around them without enough air, they may weaken. When water is needed, it is applied thoroughly so that it passes through the full root mass and drains from the openings beneath the container. The sound is gentle. Water touches the foliage, soaks into particles of soil, and falls in clear drops below. A light sprinkling that dampens only the surface may leave deeper roots dry. Thorough watering reaches the entire small landscape within the pot. That hidden landscape is as important as the visible one. Bonsai soil must hold enough moisture for the roots while also allowing excess water to drain and fresh air to enter. These needs are balanced differently according to species, climate, container, and the habits of the grower. For this reason, there is no single universal soil recipe. A mixture suited to one tree in a rainy region may not suit another tree in a dry garden. Good cultivation begins with the particular tree in its particular place. Above the soil, growth continues in many directions. New shoots lengthen, leaves turn toward the light. One branch may become stronger than its neighbors, while another remains fine and delicate. Pruning allows the caretaker to respond to this growth. To prune is simply to remove or shorten selected parts of a plant. In bonsai, pruning helps maintain balance and gradually clarifies the design. A long shoot may be shortened so that light can reach an inner branch. Crowded growth may be thinned, giving leaves or needles more space. A larger branch may be removed because it no longer belongs within the developing form. But pruning is not the same in every season or for every species. A maple responds differently from a pine. A flowering tree may form its blossoms on growth produced during an earlier season, so pruning at the wrong time could remove the coming flowers. Some trees grow readily from old wood, while others do not. The proper cut, like the proper moment, depends upon knowledge and observation. Restraint remains essential. Leaves produce energy through photosynthesis, the process by which a plant uses light to make the sugars it needs. Removing too much foliage can reduce that energy. Excessive pruning may weaken the tree rather than refine it. Strong artistic design cannot compensate for poor plant health. Sometimes a branch grows in nearly the right direction, yet needs a gradual adjustment. For this, bonsai growers often use wire. Copper or aluminum wire is wrapped carefully around a trunk or branch, following its line rather than concealing it. The wired branch can then be guided toward a new position. The movement is usually modest. A slight lowering may suggest age. A gentle turn may open space between layers of foliage. The wire supports the branch while its living tissues slowly adapt. Yet the tree does not stop growing while the wire is present. Bark thickens. Sap continues to flow through the living tissue beneath it. If wire remains too long, it can cut into the expanding branch and leave deep marks. The caretaker must inspect it regularly and remove it before it presses into the bark. Wiring is not a permanent restraint. It is temporary guidance, followed by release. Below the soil, the roots are changing too. Fine roots search through spaces between particles, taking in water, minerals, and oxygen. Over time, the root mass may become crowded. The soil itself may begin to break down, reducing the open spaces through which air and water once moved freely. Then the tree may be repotted. Repotting is often associated with spring, when buds begin to swell, and the tree is preparing for renewed growth. However, the proper season varies with species and climate. The tree is lifted from its container, and the concealed structure of its roots comes briefly into view. Some roots are pale and fine. Others are older and woody, turning around the edges of the pot. During this work, congested or poorly placed roots may be removed. This is called root pruning. It can encourage the development of fine feeder roots, the small roots that do much of the work of absorbing water and nutrients. Fresh soil replaces material that is deteriorated, restoring drainage and the movement of air around the roots. Root work must be measured carefully. Roots are living organs. Removing too many, or working at an unsuitable time, can place the tree under severe stress. A young, vigorous specimen may respond differently from an old tree with slower growth. Repotting might be needed every few years, but no fixed interval applies to all bonsai. Species, age, health, climate, vigor, soil condition, and container size all influence the decision. Once again, the calendar offers only part of the answer. The tree itself must be observed. Once returned to its pot, the bonsai settles again. Fresh particles of soil rest around the roots. Water passes through, carrying away dust and filling the smallest spaces before draining below. In the following days and weeks, new root tips may begin to extend. Above them, buds unfold according to the tree's own rhythm. That rhythm includes periods of rest. Many temperate trees, meaning species from regions with distinct warm and cold seasons, need winter dormancy. During dormancy, visible growth slows, but the quiet season remains part of the tree's natural life cycle. Protecting a bonsai from damaging extremes of cold does not mean keeping it warm indoors throughout winter. Roots, held in a shallow container, may need shelter from temperatures they could have endured more easily deep in the ground. At the same time, the tree still needs the cool conditions required by its biology. Protection and warmth are not always the same thing. Care means respecting both the tree's needs and the conditions around it. As winter eases, buds may begin to swell, their surfaces soften, a hint of green appears. The tree has not been hurried into spring. It has passed through its season of rest, and is now responding to lengthening light and changing air. Light and seasonal change also influence the size and character of foliage. Bonsai leaves and needles do not become small merely because the roots have been pruned. Their scale is shaped by many things, including the natural traits of the species, the amount of light, nutrition, pruning methods, and the development of fine branching. This fine branching is called ramification. Over years, larger limbs divide into smaller branches, and those branches divide again. A mature network can support many leaves distributed across a balanced crown. With suitable species and healthy cultivation, the foliage may become proportionate to the whole composition. Yet each tree retains its own nature. An elm remains an elm, and a pine remains a pine. The aim is not to make every tree identical. It is to help each one express its character within the scale of the composition. There are no instant methods that can replace the passage of seasons. Poor light, overwatering, tight wire, unsuitable conditions, excessive pruning, or badly timed root work may injure or even kill a tree. The patient grower accepts limits. If the tree is weak, refinement waits. Health comes first. This may mean allowing a branch to grow for a season before shortening it. It may mean leaving roots undisturbed until the tree is vigorous enough for repotting. It may mean removing wire earlier than expected because the bark has begun to thicken. The intended design remains important, but it must always make room for the needs of the living tree. When health is protected, time becomes an ally. A properly maintained bonsai may remain vigorous for generations. One caretaker learns the tree's habits and passes that knowledge to another. Scars soften into bark. Young branches become old limbs. A shape first imagined many years before gains quiet depth. The daily work may appear simple. Water is poured, a shoot is shortened, a length of wire follows the curve of a branch. During repotting, pale roots rest for a moment in the spring air before being covered again with fresh soil. Each action is small, but each belongs to a much longer pattern. Through watering, pruning, wiring, and repotting, the caretaker does not command the tree into stillness. The work is a partnership with continuing growth. Each choice answers what the tree has done and leaves room for what it may do next. The tree, meanwhile, keeps its own measure of time. It responds to warm days and cool nights. It rests, awakens, extends, and strengthens. Some changes can be seen within weeks. Others become visible only when one year is compared with another. Gradually, the silhouette becomes clearer. An upright trunk may recall a tree standing in an open meadow. A leaning branch may suggest years of mountain wind. A descending line may resemble a tree rooted above a cliff. Several trunks together may evoke the sheltered edge of a forest. In this way, patient care begins to reveal remembered landscapes. The tree remains small enough to rest within a tray, yet its form can open towards slopes, valleys, storms, and quiet woodland paths. Water settles into the soil, the wire follows the branch, fine roots wait beneath the surface, surrounded by air and moisture. Above them, leaves gather light. Nothing is truly still, though the whole composition may appear calm, and within that calm, familiar forms begin to emerge. There is the tree standing upright beneath an open sky. There is the trunk leaning into imagined weather. There is the branch descending like a tree above a distant ravine. There is the quiet gathering of trunks at a forest edge. These natural scenes, gently suggested by bonsai forms, are waiting within the branches. Chapter 9. Styles Inspired by Nature. Within the branches of a bonsai, many landscapes may be remembered. A straight trunk can suggest an open field where light reaches the tree from every side. A curved trunk may recall a wooded hillside where growth has slowly turned toward a clearing. A descending line can bring to mind the edge of a cliff. A group of slender trunks may seem like a grove viewed from far away. Bonsai artists have given names to these different forms. The names are useful, but they are not strict laws. They are descriptive frameworks, ways of noticing how trees grow and how a small composition can suggest a much larger place. A living tree does not always fit neatly into one category, nor should it be made to obey a name at the expense of its health or individual character. The style offers a possibility. The tree offers the final direction. In an open, stable setting, a tree may grow almost directly upward. Its trunk rises steadily, with little need to bend. The bonsai form known as chokan, or formal upright, recalls such conditions. In this style, the trunk is straight and gradually narrows as it rises. This taper gives the impression of a strong, mature base supporting younger, finer growth above. The branches allow the eye to travel upward until the crown comes to a quiet conclusion. A formal upright tree need not appear rigid. Its smaller branches can turn softly, and its foliage can gather in gentle, irregular shapes. The strength of the style comes not from perfect symmetry, but from balance. It may suggest a mature tree standing in a clearing, steady through long seasons of rain, sunlight, and winter stillness. Near the soil, roots may be visible as they spread from the base of the trunk. These surface roots are called nebari. Well-developed nebari can suggest stability and age, as though the tree has belonged to its small piece of ground for many years. The roots do not need to follow a perfect pattern. Their varied lines can make the sense of support more natural. They settle the tree into the earth and give the rising trunk a calm beginning. Other upright trees carry more movement. The style called moyogi, or informal upright, has a trunk that curves while the tree continues to rise overall. The trunk may move gently to one side and then the other. Its curves can suggest years of gradual adjustment, as though the tree has responded to changing light, surrounding growth, and passing weather. Yet the form does not need to represent one exact event. It gathers familiar signs of natural growth into a clear and graceful silhouette. In summer, foliage may soften the structure, allowing only brief glimpses of the trunk and branches within. Autumn brings another view, as the leaves of a deciduous bonsai change color and begin to fall. Then winter arrives and the tree reveals its quieter architecture. The larger limbs can be seen dividing into smaller ones, and those smaller branches dividing again. This fine, repeated branching is called ramification. Ramification gives depth and delicacy to the crown. In winter, it can resemble the branching of narrow streams, each small line connected to another, all returning toward the trunk. The bare silhouette may be especially revealing, showing the patient structure that summer leaves had hidden. Beyond the open field, the imagined ground begins to rise. On a hillside, a tree may lean toward light, away from competition, or in response to persistent weather. It may grow from unstable ground, or extend toward a more open space. The slanting style called shakan expresses this movement through a trunk that rises at an angle. Although the trunk leans, the composition still conveys balance. The tree does not appear to be caught in the act of falling. Instead, it seems to have found a lasting way to live at an angle. Its branches and roots support the visual movement, giving the tree both direction and calm. Again, there is no need to imagine one precise cause. A slanting bonsai may suggest wind, uncertain ground, competition for light, or movement toward open space. These possibilities can remain together, like several memories held within one form. Farther along the imagined slope, the ground becomes steeper. Stone replaces the gentle hillside, and the eye reaches the edge of a cliff. The bonsai style called tengai, or cascade, descends below the rim of its container. Its downward movement can recall a tree growing from a high, exposed ledge. The trunk may reach outward before turning below, while the living tips continue to suggest growth. A cascade does not merely hang. Its form carries both descent and life. The line may travel downward, but the tree remains active, balanced between gravity and its continuing growth. The result can feel spacious, as though the small container stands at the edge of a deep valley. From the sheltered cliff, the imagined scene moves toward a windward coast or an exposed mountain ridge. There, persistent wind may influence the direction of branches and foliage over many years. In the style called fukinagashi, or windswept, the branches appear to have been shaped predominantly toward one side. The trunk may lean in the same direction, or it may remain more upright while the crown streams away. The composition suggests enduring weather, but it does not need to reproduce a single storm. It is not an exact record of one natural event. Instead, it evokes long exposure and gradual adaptation. A windswept bonsai may appear spare, yet it need not seem damaged or distressed. Deliberately styled bonsai do not have to look wholly wild, accidental, or broken. The guiding hand of cultivation may be visible, while the tree still speaks clearly of natural growth. Some older-looking forms include areas of deadwood among the living bark. A dead branch tip or a dead section of branch is called jin. An exposed area of deadwood on the trunk is known as shari. Jin and shari may be naturally present, or they may be created skillfully. When these features belong comfortably within the composition, they can evoke age and weathering. Pale wood beside living bark may suggest long seasons of sun, wind, and exposure. Such details are most effective when used with restraint. They do not need to tell a dramatic story. A small dead branch can be enough to imply the quiet passage of time. As the imagined weather softens, the scene moves away from the exposed ridge. The gaze returns to lower ground, where trees may grow together. Not every bonsai suggests solitude. Some begin with companionship. In the twin trunk style called sokan, two trunks rise from one root base. One may be larger and the other smaller, but both remain visibly connected below. Their branches share the available space, sometimes moving apart and sometimes echoing one another. No fixed story is required. The two trunks might recall closely growing trees, or two stems of different ages joined at the roots. The meaning can remain open. What matters is their relationship, two distinct forms rising from a common foundation. Other related compositions create several trunks along a shared structure. Root-connected forms may show multiple trunks emerging along one connected system. In a raft-like form, several trunks rise from a shared or fallen trunk, each turning upward in its own way. Here the eye begins to move beyond a single trunk. It passes from one rising line to another, discovering distance within the small space of the tray. A forest or group planting is called yosei-ue. Several trees are arranged together to suggest woodland depth. Some trunks appear nearer, while others seem to recede. Open spaces become as important as the trees themselves. A narrow clearing may suggest a path through the woods. A quiet space between two groups may feel like a stream bed or a patch of light reaching the forest floor. The trees do not need to stand in strict rows. Their spacing can vary, allowing the composition to feel spacious and alive. In spring, fresh leaves gather over the group. Through summer, the crowns deepen into green, and the individual trunks become partly hidden. Autumn separates them again through change in color. Then winter returns, revealing each trunk and every fine branch against the pale spaces between. A forest planting may seem to continue beyond the edges of its container. One group of trunks leads toward another, and the smallest forms appear to stand farther away. Though the tray remains close at hand, the woodland can feel deep and unhurried. Style names help us recognize these possibilities. They teach the eye to notice upright strength, gentle curves, slanting movement, descending lines, persistent wind, shared roots, and woodland depth. But they do not replace close attention to the individual tree. No bonsai must become the exact imitation of one particular natural event. A tree may suggest a cliff without copying a known cliff, or evoke a storm without describing one moment of weather. The composition can be deliberate without losing its connection to nature, and so the gaze widens from one trunk to two, and then from two to many. The tray becomes a slope, then a grove, then a small forest resting in still air. Between the trunks lie imagined distances. Beyond them are unseen paths, quiet clearings, and deeper woods. Leaves gather light above the soil, while shared roots remain hidden below. In time, these small trees, their containers, their images, and the knowledge used to care for them would travel across much greater distances. From a forest held within a tray, the scene would widen again, opening through trade, exhibitions, books, and journeys over the sea.